Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I will be your host for this episode of Secure Talk. Today, we're going to be talking to Amit Serper, who is the Director of Security Research at Sternum IoT. Amit is a leading international cybersecurity expert, and he's passionate about everything regarding cybersecurity, vulnerability exploitation, and ethical hacking. Amit's also the one who found a quote-unquote vaccine for NotPetya. Amit believes it's time to look past the patchability approach and implement a vaccine-like solution. Today, we're going to be talking about some of those things and embedded device security, vulnerabilities, exploits, and more. But before we do that, let's say hi to Amit. Amit, how are you today?
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Pretty good. As I said, I'm just getting going because it's 6 a.m. on my side of the country. And you said you're out in Boston, yeah?
Yeah, I'm just outside of Boston.
Yeah. What's the, what's the cybersecurity type kind of community like there?
So, to be honest, it's been, at least from what I've seen, it's been a bit, kind of dead because of, since COVID and stuff. But generally speaking, there are a lot of security companies here, a lot of major vendors as well. I think that Sophos, the AV vendor, are based out of Waltham, Mass, if I'm recall correctly, which is right around the corner. And you have presence from Google, from Facebook, from Amazon, and loads of startups. So you have a lot of companies here. And before COVID hit, we used to have I think 2 or 3 different meetup groups that would meet. And back when I worked at Cybereason, we hosted a few meetups at our offices. So there are quite there's some security talent here in this area.
Yeah, and I think IBM has something out there as well.
Yeah, IBM too, correct. Yes.
Yeah. The ISSA out here is quite active, and they've started their monthly meetings again. And then the startup community, which includes security, but a whole range of other type of companies, is very, very active now. And it is just amazing because I moved back from Japan in the middle of the pandemic. In Japan, everything was wide open at that time. Came back here, and oh my God, you couldn't even have your kid go outside and play soccer. And now it's full on back, and I'm so happy about that. Hey, I want to ask you, so what does a director of security research do?
So it depends. It depends on the company. It depends on the focus. I can tell you that at Sternum, where I work, where I've been working for the past almost 8 months, it's a very interesting role because we're a small startup company. We're about 40 people, give and take, and we are a product company. So we have a product which is basically a security solution for IoT devices, whether they run Linux or RTOS operating systems. Excuse me. And the role in Sternum is interesting because it's 50%. Finding ways to improve the product. So find ways of collecting data from the operating system on the device that you're running on, but also a lot of security research on products that are out there on the market right now, things that are in people's houses and or hospitals or wherever, and finding vulnerabilities in them and disclosing those vulnerabilities to the vendors. And this is sort of like a feedback loop of which we find vulnerabilities. We learn from the experience of finding the vulnerabilities, of exploiting them in our lab. And thus, we are making our product better, but we're also making the vendor's product better because we're disclosing those vulnerabilities.
So your product is not vendor facing. I mean, talk a little bit about your product. Who is actually using your product?
Yeah, so our product is actually there's several ways to use our product. The one way is for vendors actually. So if you're for example an internet service provider and you have, your modems that you're giving out to customers, and you want to protect these modems or routers or whatever customer premises equipment that you're giving to customers, and you want to have some sort of exploit mitigation and protection on those devices, then you as the ISP would get our product and deploy it on the modem or router before it gets to the customer's house. So this is one example. Another example is if you're a tinker, if you're a person that likes messing around with network equipment or with whatever it is that you have in your house that's running embedded Linux, we actually have a free version of our product that you can download and install on any embedded device that runs OpenWRT and has an ARM chip in it. You can actually get our product for free, install it, put it on your router, for example, and be protected from various threats, and even have access to like this nifty dashboard where you can see what's going on in your device. So you could be either, we could be either like vendor facing, where the vendor would take our product and pre-deploy it on their devices, or you could be just a person in your house tinkering with our free product, or if you're a network admin working for like a big corporation with lots of devices and you want to make sure that everything is secure and working properly, so you could also reach out to us and get into business with us and deploy the product on whatever it is that you're running in your organization.
Okay, I want to ask a few more questions on that product, but then I want to go kind of broader and talk more about the quote unquote vaccine approach. So if we looked at the kind of corporate environment, how does the product actually work? Is this some kind of network scan that goes out and says, hey, you have these devices, or explain the approach?
No. So unlike a lot of these products, we are not doing any network scanning. We're actually deployed on the device itself, where you install us on the device. So if this is a Linux powered device, then you'll get this installation package that is relevant and applicable to the device that you're running. So for example, if your device is based on OpenWRT, you'll get an OpenWRT iPackage installation package, which you can just deploy in the device and install it. If you have a different device with a non-standard packaging system, we'll create a package for you that works, and you could just deploy it on the device. But our product, what we make is it's a component that runs on the IoT device itself.
Okay, and I guess my thought would be that companies have so many different IoT devices. Actually going out and installing a solution on each individual device sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, so again, it really depends on which devices we're talking about, because if it's Linux devices, if we're talking about Linux devices, you are correct. It's kind of a pain, but it's also fairly easily automatable by tools like there's so many automation tools like Ansible or stuff like that, because basically what you need is an SSH connection. So automating these installations is not something that is very, very super difficult. If we're talking about RTOS devices, which not Linux-based devices, stuff like microcontrollers or all sorts of boards, the actual installation of the product happens when you build the firmware for the device. So when you are compiling whatever it is that runs on that microcontroller or RTOS device, it's just another stage in the CI where our product gets sort of like built into the firmware that gets shipped to the device. So that is a more vendor-facing approach when we're talking about RTOS devices. So it sounds kind of weird because we are used to installing security products on computers, which is something that's fairly easy because you have You have a lot of products that help you to manage installations and all of those things. With installing things on IoT devices, the market and the market isn't quite there yet, but we have our ways of getting around that.
Awesome. So I guess that is the quote unquote vaccine approach, is because you're installing something ahead of time that's going to prevent that device from being exploited by any type of vulnerability. Is that right, or am I missing something?
No, you're spot on. The main idea is, and I mean, I can tell you about my experience. I started I started doing security research on IoT devices over a decade ago, and I was doing all of that research, and I saw that a lot of the devices out there were vulnerable to the same attacks. And even now, 10 years later, because I had a pause where I did other things and now I came back to do IoT stuff again, and nothing really changed that much. So you have a problem where you constantly have new devices reaching the market and reaching customers. And those devices leave the factory when they're not really secured. And it creates this sort of like a cat and mouse game where tomorrow there's a new botnet that's going to, I don't know, exploit your Roomba and install some sort of a DDoS program on your Roomba that will, ruin the internet for everyone. And there's like this sort of race between the attackers and the vendors, which is, okay, there's a new exploit. Okay, now the vendor needs to patch this exploit. And it's just an endless cycle that goes on and on and on and on. And in most cases of IoT devices, even if there is a patch, installing it is not something that is necessarily straightforward or easy. In a lot of devices, you'd have to go to the vendor's website, find your device, download the firmware update, then go into your device and then push that firmware update. So this whole process is not very intuitive, and you're constantly and it's not automatic. It's completely manual, and you have to be aware of recent exploits and vulnerabilities and say, oh my God, my smart electrical outlet is now vulnerable, and now I have to go and look for a patch for that thing. Our approach says, listen, we know what attacks on IoT devices look like. We know what is going to be exploited. At the end of the day, the attack surface is, so big, and we know how to look for indicators that the device is being attacked and exploited, and we can stop the exploitation as it happens because of the way that our product works, which is we're right there in the runtime, so we can see everything that happens on the device, and we're sitting in the middle of it, and we can actually stop things as they happen. So that is the vaccine approach, which basically says, listen, you can't be chasing vulnerabilities and patches all the time. You have to have something on the device that keeps it from being exploited, and that is the vaccine, which is our product. I hope it makes sense.
It totally makes sense, but to stay with that kind of analogy or approach, what we've seen with quote unquote recent vaccines is that sometimes they're effective, but then you have a new variant, and then they're all like, we need to create a new vaccine to address that variant. And I not being very technical myself, have a difficult time understanding. I mean, with the human body, you can introduce a vaccine, and the body can develop these kind of defenses. But when you're talking about machinery is fixed, it's hardwired. So you introduce something, and it cannot really evolve unless we get into some super crazy AI stuff. Then I think that we're probably a few years out from. So how can you be sure that once you've introduced this quote unquote vaccine, that it can protect against all known and future variants of vulnerabilities?
Sure. So while I always start with the analogy of the vaccine that we know from the medical, Excuse me, I'm just coming off of a nasty cold. Um,
You and another 200 million people across the country, so no worries.
yeah, yeah. So so while I always too start with the analogy of the medical vaccine and the computerized vaccines, if you will, the two are very different. I mean, a computer or an IoT device, which is basically a computer, it's eventually a deterministic machine. It's you know what's going to happen. For example, excuse me, when when something is being exploited, when a service that runs on an IoT device is being exploited, at the end of the day, there's a limited amount of how can I say it, instructions that you can call to do something that the attacker wants to do. So if you want to for example, if you want to exploit a service and run a system command that is not related to the original flow of the program, there's like 3 or 4 different system calls that you can call. Like, there's not going to be any new ones, and if there are going to be new system calls that we don't detect or whatever, our product is being updated. So we are in charge of adapting to the changes. Unfortunately, in today's world, you can't really trust the original vendor to do that for a million different reasons. Sometimes they're incapable of doing that. Sometimes they don't have enough people to push a patch. Sometimes a product, it's a business decision. A product is being released to the market, and once it's out, it's out. That's it. No one touches it. No one improves it. No one patches it. Whatever. So you can say, I mean, quote unquote, that you're outsourcing that security work for our product. So to wrap up and to answer your question completely, our product is updating. So if you're installing our product on your IoT device, if there is something new that will be able to catch and detect and mitigate, we will update our product to.
Okay, so what you're saying is once the I just love this. I'm going to keep calling it the vaccine, but once the vaccine has been deployed, that you can do auto updates. Now, is the customer does that, or is that something that Sternum IoT does as part of your?
That purely depends on the customer's approach to things. And it's like that with every solution. When I worked at a company that makes EDR solutions for computers, it was the same thing. Like, there would be the option for us to push updates, and there would be the option for the customer to get the update on demand and push it out to all of the machines on their own. So it's whatever the customer wants to do.
Got you. Okay, well, that makes sense. I mean, so what if I'm hearing you correctly? Look, because it's machines and not human beings, there is basically a finite number of ways that you can attack or exploit these devices. And if you have figured out what those vectors of attack or those methods of attack are, you can create a solution that kind of protects the device from those attacks. Now, were a new type of exploit to be discovered, then you could adapt your vaccine by just kind of providing a booster, so to speak.
Yeah, pretty much so. And also, there's something that's important to remember where an exploit, at the end of the day, all exploits pretty much boil down to the same actions when they're being exploited. It's running a different program. It's allocating some space in the memory and writing something to that space and then executing that piece of code from that segment of memory. It's as you said, it's a finite amount of actions, and we don't really care about the vulnerabilities or what they do or what piece of the code is vulnerable. we get into the action on the runtime level. So when the attacker wants to run code on the machine after something was exploited, that's where we'll be.
Awesome. Totally makes sense. I'm going to jump tracks here for a second. And, I talked to quite a few people who are in similar roles. I don't know, if I've talked to a large number of quote unquote director of security research, but people who are quite similar roles. And what's interesting about the cybersecurity space is it's the research is done a little bit differently typically. In most, let's just put cybersecurity aside, in most industries, when somebody's responsible for research or product research or kind of understanding what potential issues are out there, they tend to look at least, part of the time at what the competition is doing, okay? And a lot of people who are in similar roles to yours say that we don't really look at what the competition's doing. We look at what the bad guys are doing. Because if we know what the bad guys are doing, we know how we can, evolve our product to protect. So they'll spend a fair amount of time on the dark web, understanding what the latest vulnerabilities are, so on and so forth. How about in your situation? Because in your situation, you've kind of figured out these are the potential attack methods. So do we need to spend time out there understanding what they're doing, or do we just focus on getting our product to protect against what we already know?
It's basically one and the same. So for example, you can see my camera, but I have a bunch of devices here that I'm abusing down to the hardware level. So a lot of hands-on like hardware research that is being done. And I'm also showing you on the camera. I have like my lab over there where I take things apart.
Dude, you got. I'm totally envious of your flat there, because you've got 3 guitars that I can see of, some pretty cool posters. You're rocking the Iron Maiden T-shirt, and you've got like this mad scientist lab table with all kinds of wires and everything. That's pretty cool, man.
It's a sweet setup. I'm not gonna lie. I really enjoy working here. And the fact that it's in my house is even better because I just go upstairs and I'm in the office. As I said, it's we read a lot of reports from other vendors. We read a lot of blog posts from other researchers. There's a lot of research that we ourselves are doing. We are just now, for example, just in the past week. We have disclosed 3 different vulnerabilities to 2 different vendors, and we have a few coming up as well. So there's a lot of things that we're doing to stay up to speed to what's happening with
How does that conversation go when you approach a vendor? And maybe obviously you're not going to name any specific names, but you could give me an example of a device, and it doesn't even have to be a real example, but just so I can understand a use case. Let's say, hey, on device type A, we found a vulnerability, and so how does that conversation play out?
So it's not. It used to be a conversation. It used to be, even if you go back 7 years ago, you would send an email to the security department, and it would be like this sort of like a back and forth. In the vast majority of the cases, they're not even going to answer you because it really depends. Nowadays, it's a very streamlined process. You have a lot of companies that are using third parties like BugCrowd and HackerOne that are managing their bug bounty program, and it's a fairly straightforward process where you would fill a form on a website with all of the details of the vulnerability, and you'll upload, if you have like a proof of concept code that triggers the vulnerability and runs an exploit, you can attach that. The vendor will get your report, they'll read it. Now they're even paying you money. They'll pay you money for the vulnerabilities. So today it's a fairly streamlined and straightforward process. If you would have asked me that question like 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would have had a completely different answer for you.
So what's your major incentive for doing that? I mean, I get it with bug bounties and things like that, but you're a company. So what's your incentive?
So I'm going to be completely honest with you. There's a few examples. First of all, there's the incentive of understanding that those devices are everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know a person who doesn't have at least one or maybe more IoT devices in their like daily lives that they interact with, whether they know it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And we understand and value that you need to protect all computers, not just the big ones that are on your desk or your laptops. You need to also protect that small system on a chip that you have in your power outlet, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Because if someone can run code on them, very bad things can happen. And I have examples. So there's that. There's the true passion about securing those things. I mean, I work with a phenomenal group of people that really made that their mission. I mean, our development teams are they're people who like care so much about this and do their job so well. So there's that aspect. But there's also the aspect of, I mean, as I said, we're a small startup, and part of the ways that small companies like us get notoriety, so to say, is when we find vulnerabilities and disclose them and work with bigger vendors to make everything safer. So that also provides, that gives some positive attention to us and some good PR. So there is that too. So it's a combination of, the passion of what we're doing. Because I mean, listen, you saw my desk over here. I get paid to take things apart and poke them and make them do things that they're not supposed to do originally. I mean, that's the dream job. So that's kind of fun.
I'm just wondering, like, I'm thinking about like my favorite cars, like a Porsche, and I'm wondering if I could get Porsche to subsidize me, take it apart and put it back together. So
that's pretty much what a bug bounty is at the end of the day. I mean, that Apple, for example, they have a program where they will give, because their devices, like the iPhone, for example, is very hardened, and if you want to do security research on it, you have to jailbreak it, and you have to do a lot of things that make it work not as it was originally supposed to work. Because in order to do research on it, you have to find a vulnerability on it and exploit it. So Apple actually have a program where they give researchers unprotected devices, unprotected quote unquote, right? Like devices that researchers can do research on. So they are in one way or another, as you say, subsidizing that work.
All right, so let's you and me put on our our jackets and walk over to Porsche and see if we can get an unprotected car. Okay.
I'm with you. If I'm being honest, I have the car that I drive. I have like a fun little two-seater that is not really practical now that I have a daughter and when I live in New England. Like a two-seater convertible.
Who cares about practicality, man?
Oh yeah, the trunk can hold about 2 watermelons if you put them in right.
That's one watermelon too many, man.
and my car, I have an Abarth 124, which is basically a Mazda Miata with a different engine and a few other components.
Sweet.
And the infotainment system that it has, it's an older car, it's from 2018. It didn't come with Android Auto and all of that fun stuff. But I found after doing some reading online that the infotainment system actually has a vulnerability in it that you can exploit to run code on. So when I came to pick up my car from the dealership, like as I got the keys, I sat in the parking lot there of the dealership, and I put in this USB drive that I prepared ahead of time at home. I put it in the car, and boom, I had Android Auto in 2 seconds. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that stuff is being done as well on cars. I mean,
oh yeah,
cars and planes and all of those things are basically Linux machines with wheels. So
Dude, I mean, some of that stuff kind of freaks me out because I mean, you have all the OTA over the air updates and or excuse me, over the air, over the air updates, and if some bad people get in between you and your car or airplane, and I don't know if you saw recently, but a lot of the airlines are lobbying I believe it's the FAA to allow for single pilots or just one pilot on commercial flights. So you've got one pilot, and you've got devices that can have issues, but also you have people who can have issues. I mean, we've seen stuff like that in the past, and it's a little, I don't know, man, sketchy.
hey,
So
what could possibly go wrong?
right, right, exactly. Well, hey, let me ask you, back to the power outlet example.
Hmm.
Walk me through that. You said you could give me examples. Walk me through that scenario.
Yeah. So what was it, like 2.5 years ago? I was working at Cybersecurity, which is, it's an EDR company, nothing that has to do with IoT, absolutely nothing. And I was working on this incident response engagement with a big software company in the US, and they were hacked pretty badly. I mean, they had all of their source code stolen, and like it was really, really, really bad. And we were in this engagement, like talking to their security leadership and their board, and it was just like this almost a week where we didn't sleep. And when we were doing the analysis on how the attacker went in, we were pretty surprised because this is a company that does everything right. Their security posture is one of the best that I've seen. Everything is protected, two-factor authentication everywhere, like all of the buzzwords that you can think of, they're implementing them and then some. But we eventually found out that the way that the attackers came in was they had the building, those badge readers where you put your badge on the thing and it opens. So their badge, one of their badge readers was exposed to the internet in some way or another. I forget whether it was through their, like, one of their third party, like, maintainers or whatever, but the attackers managed to exploit a vulnerability on that badge reader. And they had and they basically used that badge reader that was connected to their network as a proxy into their network. So this is my example exactly, where you could have like this smart outlet, or there was a few years ago, there was a casino, I think, that was hacked through the aquarium. The aquarium had like a smart pump or something.
That's crazy.
And the attackers had code execution on whatever it is in the aquarium, and they used that piece of IoT machinery to basically proxy their way into the organization's network. So there are examples for those things, and while they are very cool examples, they're also very dangerous.
Yeah, and I remember the big Target breach. It started from the HVAC system, right, I believe, right?
Yeah.
But if we go to the aquarium example at a casino, I'm just curious. Okay, so you're talking to a casino. They've got an IT department, and maybe they've got one person, a couple people. Well, it depends on the casino. I mean, if we're talking like a Vegas casino, or we talking, I'm in Washington State. There's a lot of casinos on reservations and so on and so forth. So my image of a casino back when I was growing up was the Vegas Strip. These days, my vision of casino is just this kind of Costco type building out in the middle of the countryside where you shuttle in a bunch of retirees every day and shuttle them out with a little less money in their pocket. But
that sounds mildly depressing.
Yeah, dude, go there, man. Go there. You see people, the last years of their life. No, they're wheeling them in on wheelchairs. They've got the oxygen tanks and everything, man. But so in either scenario, the Vegas Strip scenario or the local casino in your state of choice, you've got a security team that's typically responsible for people who, they're trying to take money out of the casino, like, by card counting or whatever. And I'm sure you have IT teams, and then maybe you have a security, I guess, team as part of that team, or maybe you outsource security. Who knows when you go in there with your solution with Sternum IoT's, is it Sternum? Yeah, Sternum IoT's solution. Who's going to know that, hey, we've got a smart pump in the fish tank? How do you spot those? What's your process for informing your customers that, hey, you know what, that pump in the fish tank there? Because I would never think about that.
Well, this is part of the sales process, if I'm being honest. Not something that I am too much involved in, but there are, and that happens, by the way, with a lot of other security vendors. For example, when one of my previous works was also the same, like the customer would get like this sort of like a questionnaire where you would like enumerate all of the smart devices that you have. Or again, if a customer is not aware that they have I don't know, an internet connected aquarium, you can't really force feed people. But there is a questionnaire as a part of the sales and onboarding process, and we do try to we try our best to adapt to the customer's needs. But I will say that in what I see now coming on the business pipeline, it's a lot of companies that they are well aware of what they have.
Okay.
So it's for example, a company that makes cameras that sit on manufacturing on factories, and it's like a smart camera that looks at whatever it is that's being manufactured on the floor, and it can spot defects by using AI and all of those buzzwords. So the company that makes those cameras, they know what they need, right?
Yeah.
Or if I'm going back to the internet service provider example I gave before, they know what they need. Usually, right now we're more talking to vendors of devices. But whoever comes to us with whatever ask they have, we're happy to oblige.
Awesome. Hey, just a couple more questions. I got to say, like, you're a startup, and you come out and say, hey, we want to deploy this quote unquote vaccine on all your IoT devices. And I'd be like, okay, so how can we trust the vaccine? And, how do we know what's in there? And how do we know that can't be exploited or used by, let's say, anybody?
So it's a great question. And actually, we've faced some of those, and we're facing some of those questions right now. I mentioned before that we have a free product that you can experiment with and download and install on your devices at home. And when we went out with that and we published that on Reddit and on social media, some people said exactly what you're saying. Like, I'm who are they? They're a small startup. I know nothing about them. Why would I install them in one of the most sensitive and critical points of my network? Fair. Like I probably would have said the same. And this is a challenge where, first of all, this is why we want to disclose vulnerabilities and work with vendors, because this helps us build a reputation of people who are acting out of good character, people who are experts in their field and know about security and understand the complexity of IoT device security. So this is a real challenge, but we have we have a dev relations person that goes to all of these forums and try to answer all of these questions. Whatever data that is public that we can share. So like our technology is patented, so we can share the patent. So you can go and see and read the patent for yourself. And in the future, we are planning on open sourcing some components. So we are working on it. But as I said, we're still a small company.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that for our size and for the challenges that we have to do, and the scale that we're working on, I think that the people that we have on the team are incredible. I'm really excited to say that I work with a bunch of really, really incredible people.
That's awesome, man. Hey, why don't you, if it's okay, give me a little bit of background in terms of the company formation, your funding situation, and how did the company evolve?
So the company was founded by Natalie Chuva, which is our CEO, and Lian Granot, which is our co-founder and CTO. As I said, there's about 40 of us, give and take. We are working on growing. We're hiring developers. We're hiring. There's a very nice wanted section on our website. The company is headquartered in Israel. So while I am originally Israeli, I've been living in the States for 6.5 years now. So I work out of my house in Massachusetts. We have a few other people in the States, mostly in sales positions. And as I said, company is headquartered in Tel Aviv, Israel, but we have developer teams in Poland and in Ukraine, and we're really trying to. Although we're a small company, we're trying to build ourselves as an international company. So unlike other security companies that are based out of Israel, we don't try to limit ourselves to only Israeli talent. So we are hiring people, as I said, abroad, and whoever is passionate and wants to join us, we'll gladly talk to them.
And are you VC backed or bootstrapped or?
Sorry, yes, we are VC backed. Yes, there's several known investors like Santo Politi from Spark, and there's a few very well known VCs behind us.
Excellent. Hey, one last question, and I say that, and more things might pop into my brain, but when you're going out to these vendors or manufacturers of these IoT devices, is there? I mean, right now you're kind of just doing it. Are you selling to them though? I mean, is this a solution that you could sell to them directly so that they could just go ahead and as they ship the device, it can ship with the vaccine?
Hopefully, yes. This
Okay.
is what we're trying to do. Yes.
Awesome. Well, hey, Amit, if people want to find out more information about Sternum IoT and your products, services, etc., and some of those positions you're trying to hire, I suppose they could just go to your website?
Yes. So to find out more information on the company and positions that are open and the projects that we're releasing, you're more than welcome to go to sternumiot.com. And if you're interested in following me around, I have completely minimized my presence on Twitter because of how things are going there, and I'm on.
So you're not a fan. You're not a fan of the man, huh?
Well, it's not how you manage a company. With the things that happen at Twitter, especially, by the way, that now apparently there was an insane data leak with like 235 million email addresses leaking, and Twitter doesn't really have a security department right now because he fired everyone. So I am on Mastodon though, so infosec.exchange/0x-AMIT. So that's where you can find me on Mastodon.
Awesome, man. Well, Amit, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I like talking to people who are working in organizations that have a unique approach because, as you said, there's a lot of EDR companies out there, and it can. I think it's nice to have a paradigm switch and also just see a company that's trying something new. So, hey, this has been a great conversation, and I'd like to wish you guys an awesome 2023.
Thank you. Right back at you.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.